The UK has accused China of gross and egregious human rights abuses against its mainly Muslim Uighur population in the western province of Xinjiang. According to rights groups, around 1 million ethnic Uyghurs have been detained in re-education camps there to purge them of their faith and identity. While the camps are shrouded in secrecy, there's growing evidence of mass torture and forced sterilizations to slash birth rates. Exiled Uyghurs have accused Chinese officials of genocide and crimes against humanity, and are urging the International Criminal Court to investigate. Beijing says the camps are vocational education centers to combat extremism, where students learn Mandarin and job skills. Nury Turkel is from the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom and chairman of the Uighur Human Rights Project. He joins us via Skype from Washington, D.C. Sir, thank you so much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. So we now see the UK accusing China of gross and egregious human rights abuses. Do you sense that perhaps the tide is turning on the way that certainly many Western countries are relating to China when it comes to the Uyghur issue, of which we've heard reports about for a long time now?
It's good to be with you, Barbara. The level of the seriousness of the crisis that came to surface in the last 2-3 years cried out for global condemnation, strong governmental responses that has not been really shown until the United States government recently passed this Uyghur bill, Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, and the sanctioning of 4 Chinese officials, senior Chinese officials, under the global Magnitsky sanction. This should be just the beginning of the effort to address the worst, one of the worst humanitarian crises that have been described by experts and policymakers and government officials as the largest internment of ethnic minorities since the Second World War. The Uyghurs being bound and blindfolded, loaded onto train headed for modern-day concentration camps, absolutely sickening. And also the images that we have seen reminds us the events unfolding in Auschwitz in the 1940s. The Auschwitz of 1944 shares a striking resemblance to what is happening to the Uyghurs in 2020. So the international community cannot continue to feign ignorance or look the other way, and it's time for action. I urge the European nations in particular that has a history of Nazi Germany and fascism to speak out. It's not that difficult. United States has done it. I see that the United Kingdom is in the process of taking action. Sanctioning the human rights abusers under the available legal tools is something that can be done immediately in the short term. In the long term, the industrialized nations, democratic nations, liberal democracies must revisit their relationship with communist China with respect to the Uyghurs and Hong Kong and others. The modern-day concentration camp has been in existence in the last 3 years, but now, because of the forced labor, the modern-day slavery, the Chinese state has effectively polluted the global supply chain.
Forgive me for stepping in. I mean, you mentioned a lot of the countries should speak out. In fairness, a lot of countries and people have, but it's about the kind of action that is going to be taken against a country like China that has enormous economic power and many Western countries have strong relations with. And so I kind of go back to my initial question. Do you feel that the tide is turning because, for example, of a lot of criticisms or suspicions? We've seen, Huawei being told they can't participate in 5G in the UK, the coronavirus crisis. Do you think the tide is changing?
Yes, it is. I welcome any decisions governmentally, societally, to address the atrocities committed against the Uyghur people. The train has left the station. I keep referring to the train. Train has left the station, but the international community still has time to catch up. It's past time for action. We cannot continue to feign ignorance, as has been the case in some policymakers in Europe, around the world, and also global business communities. This is also something that is a matter of conscience for those who care for human rights. As we speak in a daylight, Chinese have been criminalizing the entire Uyghur population, and we should not let that happen. And also the international community should not let the Chinese authorities to test the conscience of the international community. So this is a matter of personal decision for those who can speak. And also, this is a matter of principle for those who are in power.
And very briefly, so we're slightly running out of time, but what pressure do you think that China would listen to? What do you think they care about?
Chinese authorities or country, as a nation, they respond very well to force and strengths. Two things have to be done. One is the international community must call out the Chinese government for the crimes being committed against Uyghur people. Those genocidal policies should be condemned across the board. And then two, the international community, especially those countries that have an intimate economic relationship with China, have to revisit their relationship. This status quo cannot continue. At least 83 global brands have been tainted because of China's modern-day slavery of enslaving the Uyghurs in a Western assembly line.
Nury Turkel from the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedoms and chairman of the Uighur Human Rights Project. Sir, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.